much. People who end up speaking about it in their research, it gives away the fact that they are really novices at doing research. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to substantiate the research hypothesis. We're trying to reject the null. Because only through rejecting the null can we support the research hypothesis. In America, we have a criminal justice system where everyone is considered innocent until proven guilty. And so we have 12 people sit in a courtroom, and the lawyers talk to those 12 people and say, this is why I think this person is guilty. Here's the evidence I have. Here's the evidence I have. Here's the evidence I have. And unless those 12 people reject the fact that he might be innocent, the person will not be found guilty. You see, it's a backwards logic. It's really, this is one of the most complicated things in research, in statistics, because it's a backwards logic. It's a backwards logic. And people have a hard time understanding that. If I want to say that girls and boys are different, I do that by showing that the difference I'm looking at in my data is so big that it probably could not happen if those two groups of people were not different. In other words, the probability of that much difference under the null hypothesis is less than 1 time in 1,000. I don't think the null hypothesis is true. If I poll an event, and I find that much difference, how could the null hypothesis be true in the world? Impossible. You see, that's enough evidence to reject the null hypothesis. That's enough evidence to find the person guilty. To say, look at, he had the gun in his hand, he had residue on his hand, he had blood on his shirt. It's impossible that he did not kill that person. We reject that null hypothesis that he's innocent, and we find the person guilty. In statistics, we do the same thing. The difference between group A and group B is so large that it's impossible that it came from a situation where group A and group B are exactly the same. It's impossible. Therefore, we reject that null hypothesis. But if we do not reject the null hypothesis, it does not mean the null hypothesis is true. Not at all. The null hypothesis still may be false. It's just that the probability of that difference isn't large enough for us with confidence to reject the null hypothesis. Now, those of you in languages and social sciences, probability less than 5 times in 100, less than 10 times in 100 sometimes, less than 1 time in 100, those are probabilities that you reject the null. 0.1, 0.05, 0.01. If we can get those kind of probabilities, we can reject the null, and we can say this supports our research hypothesis. If you're in the sciences or in engineering, they don't even look at 0.1s or 0.05s. They've got to have 0.01s or 0.001s, or their field will not accept their results. In other words, their data has to be so rare under the null hypothesis before they can claim that it supports their research hypothesis. So there's a different standard. And then if you go to nursing and the medical field, you're looking at 0.00001, or even worse, because they can't have people die. You can't make those kind of decisions. If you're spending $1 billion, you don't make that judgment on a probability of less than 0.05. You ask for probabilities, 0.00001, because you don't want to lose your $1 billion. The problem is, every time we make a judgment, there's a chance we made the wrong judgment. As you know, America has sent space shuttles into space. And every now and then, those space shuttles have crashed and killed the people. We use probabilities pretty low to make sure that everything is functioning correctly. But even when you use that kind of criteria, it's still possible that a mistake will happen. It's still possible that the engineers one day are going to reject the null hypotheses that they shouldn't have rejected. And they're going to say there's a difference between steel A and steel B, and there really was no difference at all. It's going to happen. It's going to happen to all of us. There's a probability. Very hard logic, this part of science, this part of research, but a very important. And this is the kind of understanding that I tried to tell you this morning. The kind of understanding we can see in people when I talk to people. If I talk to them about their profession, if I talk to them about their research, if you go to an interview, if you go to an interview for entering into a PhD program, if you write a proposal for, those of us who know the field, we can sense when a person has this understanding of the nature of science and what it means, how it goes about his business. And it's just really hard to cultivate. I learned it because I worked with good mentors. Those young years when I was working my way through my master's degree, I had some of the very best mentors that I could possibly have. And then when I went to USC, I had the best staff teacher in the world. And he was so clear and so easy to understand. He really, the light goes on. And once the light goes on, it never goes off. And so I spent a lot of my life trying to get that across. And I think I have in a lot of people, but it's something all of you have to keep on trying to cultivate. It can be frustrating, it can drive you nuts. Believe me, it can drive you nuts. But you've got to try it, you've got to make those mistakes, have someone tell you, no, that's wrong, you've got to do it this way, okay? And do it over and over again. And pretty soon, one day, I think I did things for a year. And then one Saturday I was working and the light went on. And I knew exactly what was going on, and that was it. But it took me a year, every day working on those kind of things. That's what I want you to understand. That, and I want you to understand the flexibility in research, the art of doing research. The fact that it's not just rigid rules. It is not rigid rules. All of the rules can be bent. All of the rules should be bent. You should apply all of these tools to the very best option that you can apply them. Use your ingenuity. Use your innovation. Do it different ways. Try. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Make the mistakes. And from the mistakes, you will learn. Don't laugh at each other if you make mistakes. That's even today, we make mistakes. I just did this baseline survey, okay? And so I got up at midnight one night and knocked the survey out by about 3 o'clock in the morning. Then I sent it to all my colleagues at CMU. And they tore it apart. They read it and they found mistakes, they found typing errors, they found word errors, grammar errors. But when they were all finished, now the survey is a really good survey. It's online, it can be administered, the data is collected automatically, it goes into a file, we can analyze it. But that's what we have to do. And you don't take any of it personally, that's just the nature of the process. How are we doing?
Top 1, set 3.
No.
You like it?
In a few minutes, we're not going to do it. You have a PowerPoint.
But you may want to skip some of those.
This is the beginning of the. Well, all of them. We talked about most of all of these. They're all challenges to us. How we go about solving them, And once again, if I gave a single question, the same question to all of you, and gave you an hour to give me how you would approach it from a research point of view, I could get a different answer from each one of you, and every answer would be correct. Nothing would be wrong. Some answers would be stronger than others. Some answers would require more money than others. Some answers would show more experience than others, show more sophistication than others. But maybe all the answers would be okay. Maybe a couple of them wouldn't be okay. I don't know. Who knows? But realize that there's not just a single template to all of this stuff. Funding, grant writing, we do single workshops on grant writing where we try to help people. We try to help people learn how to write grants. It takes time. Unfortunately, in Vietnam, we don't have the resources yet. We don't have the kind of opportunities that are available any other place. But even other places in the West, it's still challenging to get a grant funding. It's really challenging. Like I said, there are people who write grants, and the first 9 are rejected. Maybe by the 10th one they will get it. So if you can do 10% in America, you're doing pretty good. Here the challenge is even probably more than that. Okay, so but you need to. These days there are wonderful websites. Now I'll try to get a collection of them to you. Okay, that cover grant writing. They cover research methodology, especially that knowledge-based website. Beautiful. The English isn't too bad. They're not extended discussions. They kind of give you the essence, and you can use those things. You can search any term on Google, and you can find explanations of it. Research questions. I can write these words all day, but until you try to practice and do it, they're not going to make sense to you. They're not going to stick. You've just got to try a research question, get someone to look at it, see if it's okay, think about what the design would be, throw in the trash, write another research question. If you have my cards, you can, it only takes me 5 minutes. If you have an idea, you put it in an email and you just send it to me. Say, Dennis, I have this idea. What do you think? It takes me 5 minutes to respond to you. I'll give you 5 minutes. I'll give you 10 minutes. Just take the time yourself to send me something and ask. And usually I can get you at least thinking, or I can say, I have no idea what you're talking about, or I'll tell you honestly. But that's the way you've got to do it. You've got to find people who will interact with you, because we can't do it by ourselves. Literature review. I haven't explored, but we have a new Sage research. This is from my library. We have wonderful facilities, in the Western Library that when we want to do a literature review, we can. It's amazing what's available to us, and so it's hard for you to compete with that. It's really difficult until your libraries, until your institutions get stronger in that area. We didn't talk about population and sampling, very, very important, but at the basic level, not so important. If you go on to a PhD or advanced study, by the way, that was one of the reasons one of the things we didn't talk about as being a great reason for getting more involved in research. In the Western world, research is the essence of graduate education. You don't get into a PhD program, you usually don't get out of a master's program without doing some credible piece of research. We expect that. That is the core of our graduate education. We have some programs that are totally research programs. You take just 1 or 2 courses, and then the rest of your time you engage in research until you produce 3 or 4 articles. And then once you produce 3 or 4 articles, you're given your PhD. We have all kinds of varieties of programs, but it's really important if you want to go on for a PhD to make sure that you feel a little bit of self-confidence in this area, and that means practicing, reading some articles, making sure you're up on the literature and stuff. So another good reason, modes of observation, and see there, you can't in a day learn everything about research methods. I realized, and I knew that when I agreed to come down here for one day and talk to you. There's no way to teach you everything in one day. There's no way to teach in 8 days with the CBO project. You know? These things take a constant commitment over weeks. You know, just doing a little bit each week for your whole career, and even at the end of your career, you know, I still struggle to keep up with things. I still struggle to keep up with areas. HIV research is expanding so rapidly, and its techniques of tracking down public health issues and how HIV is transmitted, especially in Vietnam. Some really wonderful stuff has been done. But you know, it takes time for me to read and grasp that and make sure I understand what's happening. I try to keep up with several fields, and all of you should try to keep up with those areas that you're really passionate about. If you can find things to do in an area where you have passion, then it's going to be easier for you to do it. It's going to be easier for you to dedicate pieces of your life to try to do research kinds of things. So try to find things that you really are interested in, really care about, and see if you can't engage and do some little pieces of research. All of these are issues that I would talk to you about far from publication. Has anyone published? Anybody in the room published?
But just in the national,
Oh,
so it's
yeah.
not
How
the
about
national,
peer review? You know what a peer review is? You know, you submit an article to be published to a journal which is peer reviewed. They take your name off of the submission. They send it out to 3 professionals. Those 3 professionals will review your work,
Yes.
and they will send back their critiques.
Yeah.
And in sending back the critiques, they will say this is not worth publishing, this is worth publishing, but it needs a lot of revision. This is worth publishing with minor revisions. And then it comes back to you, and they tell you what the verdict is. You do the revisions if that's the case. You send it back to them. It's a long process because the process ensures that the things that show up in those journals are credible pieces of work. They're not just fabrications. They're not plagiarized. And they're within the context of the professionals who know those areas. So the people they send the article out to are people who know about that particular issue, and they do a pretty good job of review. So peer review. No one's got the publication. When you do an article, and you should probably try to get one that you can submit. You know, and you have to follow in the journal, in the front page of the journal. Usually they tell you the format. They say how many pages, it can't be more than this page. They tell you 10 or 12 points. They tell you the margin. They tell you how it should be footnoted or how it should be referenced. They tell you virtually everything about what their standards are for submitting an article to that particular journal. Try it someday. It'll drive you nuts. It'll drive you crazy. It's very, very hard. I did as much of that only what it took to get promoted. Otherwise, I spent my time doing applied research where I didn't have to follow that standard, but I still had to appear before boards and politicians and make hard recommendations about spending money and those kind of things. But it wasn't the academic publication of business.
Please do talk about it.
Well, we are always looking for elements of the world around us when we're doing our research that will impact what we do, you know, and cause problems in the interpretation or cause problems in forming the consensus about the results. Some of these are very, very important, and especially among teachers, you know. things like testing. You know, if we test students, it has an impact. Because if we retest them, they remember something from the previous test. So we have to solve that problem of how we can test without having the impact of testing. We also have the confounding variable of maturation. Even, you know, you start at the beginning of the semester, you do some things, you collect some data, and then you do something along the semester, and at the end of the semester, you want to say, well, did what I did work? Well, did it work, or did the kids just grow up? Did they mature during that period of time? And it could be that if you didn't do anything, the changes that you saw still would have happened. And that's the question you have to resolve. So all of these things we look at, these are the common things that we look at as influencing our results, and we have to be sure that we can rule them out. I mean, the main thing, you know, one of the things that people, the students here in Vietnam don't do a good job at is explaining a way to make sure that the audience realizes that they've thought about some of these things and that it couldn't have possibly affected what they did, that somehow they control for those kind of things. One of the big ones are the differences in teachers. Sometimes they will have a method A and a method B. The big problem with that is method A is taught by teacher A, method B is taught by teacher B. So is it the difference in methods or is it the difference in teachers? I don't know. We have to rule this. Oh, too much. Sorry. You can read those. You can ask me questions. You okay? Hey, really, thank you for inviting me. It was nice to be here. Nice to spend the day with you. Everyone got my card? Anyone can get my card? You have my email address? Send me love letters. But do, you can give me a card. But be sure, if you write me, to remind me who you are, what your name is, and where I met you, okay? So that I will have a context. But thank you very much. See you again someday.
All right. On behalf of the class, I would like to say thank you again for being here with us, and hope to see you again in the next workshops. And also on behalf of the organizers, thank you for coming and asking a lot of questions. And also thank you to the thanks to the other organizers, Mr. He Fu Shi and Mr. Nào Cảng, for organizing the workshop. And I guess that's all for my job, being the MC today. And have a nice time today. Bye bye.
I'm going back to Ho Chi Minh City.
Yeah. All right.
But it's good to get out of the city. You know, I forget. For some reason, I had a more urban image in my mind about Canada because I haven't visited here in a long time. But it's still rather